Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode from DGMZ diwan-e-ghalib-meri-zubaani. To all our returning viewers, we are very glad that you could join us again. And to the new viewers, we are delighted that you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Today's episode is part of the DGMZ Miniseries we are currently running. This miniseries is dedicated to the immortal love story of Layla-e-Majnun. As part of this series, we are narrating the story from a book and also exploring the story through other art forms like paintings, Urdu poetry, Sher, etc. So today we will get into the narration from chapter 17 onwards. But before I start the narration, DGMZ takes this opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate Suluk Press Publishing House for allowing us to narrate this story from the publication titled The Story of Layla-e-Majnun by Nizami, translated from the Persian and edited by Rudolph Gelpke. English version in collaboration with E. Matin and G. Hill. Final chapter translated from the Persian by Pirzia Inayat Khan and Omid Safi. The description section of this episode will have a link to this book for viewers who want to own a copy. It will also have links of the DGMZ Ghazal podcast episodes, where Ghalib mentions Layla Majnun in different contexts. So, let's start the narration for today's episode. Start of narration. The Story of Layla and Majnun, Chapter 17. One day, Majnun and Nawfal were sitting together, gay and happy as usual. Who would have thought that a bitter drop could fall into the cup of their friendship? Suddenly, a shadow passed over Majnun's face. The smile on his lips died, and he recited these lines. Start of quotes. My sighs, my bitter tears leave you unmoved. My griefs and sorrows do not harass you. Not one, not half a promise did you keep. Of many hundreds I received from you. You promised to fulfill my keen desire. Yet you forgot to grant my sweet reward. Instead of damping it, you stirred the fire. With empty words did you seduce my heart. End of quotes. Nawfal understood the meaning only too well. What could he answer? The great warrior had no weapon against this attack. He sat there, abashed, his lowered eyes sad and melancholy. Majnun was more than ever overwhelmed by the desire for his beloved. It did not matter to him how hard it was. Nawfal had to fulfill what he had promised. In great bitterness, Majnun continued. Start of quotes. At the time when we made our covenant, your tongue was certainly very quick. Remember? Why then do you remain silent today? Why do you not offer a salve for my wounded heart? My patience is at an end. My reason rebels. Help me, lest I perish. Or must I seek assistance from better friends than you? What am I to think of you? A prince who gives his word only to break it. And to me, friendless, weak, broken, dying of thirst for the water of life. Is it not one of the commandments that one must offer water to the thirsty? Stand by your promise, or the madman whom you lured out of the desert will return to it. Unite me with Layla, or I shall throw my life away. End of quotes. The story of Layla and Majnun, chapter 18. When Nawfal heard his friend talking, his heart melted like wax in the flame. Without searching for words, where only deeds could count, he jumped up and went resolutely to work. Exchanging his robe for a suit of armor, he seized the sword instead of the cup and rallied 100 horsemen, all skilled hunters and warriors, devoted to their chieftain and swift as birds of prey. At the head of this army, he set out, Majnu riding at his side, spoiling for the fray like a black lion. After a time, they reached the pastures of Layla's tribe. When they could see the tents from afar, Nawfal ordered his men to dismount and pitch camp. Then he sent a herald to Layla's tribe with this message. Start of quotes. I, Nawfal, have arrived with an army ready to fight you like an all-devouring fire. Hurry, therefore, and bring Layla to me, or the sword will have to decide between us. I am determined that Layla shall belong to the man who is worthy of her, so that his longing may be stilled and his thirst quenched. End of quotes. After a while, the messenger returned with this reply. Start of quotes. The way you have chosen will not lead you to your goal. Layla is no sweet meat for people of your kind, and to reach for the moon is not for everyone. The decision is not yours. Do you plan to steal the sun? Are you asking for the comets? You cursed demon? Draw your sword against us. You glass bottle, we shall know how to break you. End of quotes. Furious, Nawfal sent a second message. Start of quotes. Ignorant fools, you do not seem to realize how keen is the edge of my sword. Once it has smitten you, you will never again worry about your racing dromedaries. Do you really think you can block the path of an ocean wave? Come now, do as you are told, or disaster will overtake you. End of quotes. But once more, the herald returned with a rejection, couched in abuse and derision. By now, Nawfal was boiling with rage. He vented the red-hot fury of his heart in wild threats. He tore his sword out of its scabbard and led his men like a hungry lion towards the enemy camp. There also the men had prepared for battle. Bristling with arms, they left the tents, and soon the armies met in a terrible clash, like two mountains hurled at each other. What noise! What uproar! What turmoil! The heavy breakers of battle rolled to and fro, while the cries of the warriors were rising to heaven. Blood poured from their wounds into the thirsty sand. The swords became the cup-bearers and filled the cups so overfull that the earth was drunk with purple-colored wine. Like lions' claws, the spears tore breasts and limbs. The arrows drank the sap of life with wide open beaks like birds of prey. And proud heroes, heads severed from trunks, lay down for the sleep of eternity. The thundering noise roaring over the battlefield deafened the dome of the sky and its stars. Steel and stone struck sparks like the deadly lightning of fate. Like black wild cats, horsemen set upon horsemen, warriors crouching on their mounts as if riding white demons. Majnu alone did not take part in this massacre. Was not death gathering the harvest for his sake? Yet he stood aside, his sword hidden in its sheath, though not from fear or cowardice. While each warrior thought of nothing but to kill the enemy and to defend himself, the poet was sharing the sufferings of both sides. Majnu was in deep torment. Every blow from friend or foe smote him. Unarmed, he threw himself into the middle of the fray, crying to God and to the fighting warriors for peace. Between the lines of battle, he looked like a lonely pilgrim. But how could anyone take notice of him in such an hour? It was a miracle that he remained unharmed. Did Majnu hope for Nawfal's victory? Indeed, he should. But the longer the terrible fight lasted, the more confused became Majnu's heart. Had he not meant to die for Layla? Yet her own people, men of her tribe and blood, were now being killed for his sake. Killed by whom? By Nawfal and Nawfal's men, Majnu's friends. Were they really his friends? Were they not rather his friends' enemies? Thus, while the battle of the horsemen raged outside, another struggle broke out inside the poet's soul, as bitter as the one in the field. If shame had not paralyzed his arm, Majnu would have drawn his sword against his own side. But he was conscious that this would be infamous. In his imagination, he could hear the jeering laughter of the enemy. Had he attacked from behind those whose only thought was to help him? Still, if fate had permitted, he would have sent his arrows against those who fought Layla's tribe. His heart was with the men who defied his own champions. His lips prayed for help for his opponents. He longed to kiss the hand which had just flung one of Nawfal's riders out of the saddle. In the end, this impulse became so strong that he could hardly subdue it. Time and again, he rejoiced when the enemy advanced and became downcast and miserable when Nawfal's men gained an advantage. Eventually, one of Nawfal's horsemen noticed this. He turned to Majnun, shouting, "What ails you, noble mind? Why do you enjoy this strife only from afar? Why do you even show favor to the enemy? Have you forgotten that we are risking our lives for you and for your sake?" "If they were enemies," Majnun replied, "I could fight them. But as these enemies are my friends, what shall I do? This is no battlefield for me. The heart of my beloved beats for the enemy, and where her heart beats, there is my home. I want to die for my beloved, not kill other men. How then could I be on your side when I have given up myself?" Meanwhile, Nawfal, sword in hand and constantly in the thick of battle, had striven hard for victory. Like the daredevil he was, unflinching like a drunken elephant, he assailed time and again the walls of the enemy. Many of them he had struck down, but when the dark blue tresses of the evening twilight began to throw their shadow over the day's burning forehead, the battle was still undecided. Soon, night enveloped the fighting men. After the serpent of darkness had swallowed the last little glass pearl of light on the horizon, they separated, and soon none of them could see the other. They were neither victors nor vanquished, but on both sides many brave men had fallen, and the number of wounded was even greater than that of the dead. Nevertheless, Nawfal had not given up hope of forcing the enemy to his knees on the following day. But when, in the first light of the new morning, he was about to lead his sadly diminished troop into battle, his scouts reported that during the night the enemy had been reinforced from other tribes. If Nawfal was a hero, he was not a fool. After some reflection, he decided on the only move still left to him. He sent a herald into the enemy camp with this message. Start of quotes. Enough of the sword play. Wounds have to be nursed. Let us tread the way of peace. What I desired from you, and still desire, is the fairy maid who could break the spell and free a bewitched youth from his delusion. In turn, I am prepared to pay you donkey loads of treasure. And if you are ready to accept this proposal, your answer will sound much more harmonious than this, my speech. But even if you refuse, and your sugar is not for sale, we should nevertheless stop filling our lives with the sour taste of vinegar. Let the arms rest. End of quotes. The result was not unexpected. Nawfal's suggestion that Layla should be handed over against the payment of a huge sum was rejected with the same determination as on the day before. How could it have been otherwise? On the other hand, there was no objection to a truce. No more blood was to be shed, and Nawfal and his men returned home. End of narration. Is there any love story without war? Yeah. Yeah. So, I hope you enjoyed the narration of those 3 chapters. And let's do a brief impression before we close the episode. So, the 17th chapter, right, where Majnu reproaches Nawfal. Now, this chapter has Nizami use the reason that made Nawfal and Majnu become close friends, now bring them at odds with each other. So the same reason that brought them together and developed this friendship is now used to bring them head to head with each other, right? And this is how Nizami writes this particular moment, or captures this particular moment. Who would have thought that a bitter drop could fall into the cup of their friendship? And then it seems as if Nizami is detailing a scenario where Majnu was lulled in Nawfal's friendship. Majnu, who had been taking comfort and being lulled by Nawfal's friendship, once again awakens to the sharp pain of separation in Layla's love. And Majnu uses that same pain to jab Nawfal with equal intensity, right? So that is a very interesting scene that Nizami details. And one thing that really caught my attention was that Nizami somehow makes Majnu exhibit this myriad of emotions when he talks to Nawfal in this. So it seems that Majnu is angry when he says this. What am I to think of you? A prince who gives his word only to break it. Then it seems that Majnu is hurt when he says this. Why do you not offer a salve for my wounded heart? Then it seems that Majnu is lashing out when he says this. My patience is at an end. My reason rebels. Then it seems as if Majnu is pleading when he says this. Help me, lest I perish. And then lastly, it seems that Majnu is threatening Nawfal when he says this. Unite me with Layla, or I shall throw my life away. So, like I said, so many emotions, right? You can see Majnu going through all these emotions of anger and hurt and lashing out and pleading, and then lastly, the threat that I will give up my life if you do not unite me to Layla as you had promised. So again, like I always say, it's an epic for a reason. The mastery of Nizami is very evident here, and of course, beautiful translation by Rudolph Gelpke, uh, to keep that intact in the English version. Moving on to chapter 18. Now, this is a tough one to read because Nizami here is detailing the terrible pain, the terrible anguish and loss of a war. And when you go through the chapter, you notice that Nizami is very poetic, still very poetic, or continues to be very poetic when he's describing the war. And that is when it clicks, right, as a reader, that, oh, yeah, Nizami's Layla and Majnun is actually a poem. It's a Masnavi. So, it is very, it's a unique way to detail something so painful and full of loss and full of anguish, something like a war. It is very unique to read it described this way. Let's just visit that one more time, how Nizami is describing the war. And you will see what I mean by, there's still this poetic, lyrical quality to it. While the cries of the warriors were rising to heaven, blood poured from their wounds into the thirsty sand. Earth was drunk with purple-colored wine. Like lion, my apologies, scratch, like lion's claw, the spears tore breasts and limbs. Arrows drank the sap of life, with wide open beaks like birds of prey. Proud heroes, head severed from trunks, lay down for the sleep of eternity. Steel and stone struck sparks like the deadly lightning of fate. So yes, you can see the pain, yes, you can see the loss, you can see blood spilling, but it's just the way he describes it. It remains to be very lyrical and poetic. And I think Nizami reminds us of the horror war brings, and almost is appealing to humanity. When he goes through this detailed description, it almost seems as if he's appealing to humanity to never forget the price of war for both sides. The side who wins, the side who loses. And lastly, the poet and lover in Majnun. How heavily he regrets his decision of partnering with Nawfal on his plan to win Layla over by force and war. You can see Majnun torn apart, right? Nizami writes, had he not meant to die for Layla? Another struggle broke out inside the poet's soul, as bitter as the one in the field. So, yes, trying to win love through war is never a smart strategy. It's never a smart strategy because they are the two opposites of the spectrum. They are not designed to fulfill each other's purposes, because the purpose of love and war are equally opposite. They are equally opposite. War can never achieve love, and love usually will never encourage war. And here, when Majnun does that with Nawfal, there is a heavy regret. There is a heavy price that love will pay for this incorrect decision making. And lastly, I could not help notice how Nizami sums up the A to Z of war in like 5 words, right? This is what he writes. There was neither victor nor vanquished. Yes, he was detailing the result of this war, but for any war, irrespective of who wins it and who loses it, isn't this the ultimate reality? Well, that's all I had for this episode. I genuinely hope you enjoyed the narration and the brief impressions that followed. If you did, do interact with us via comments, feedback. If you like the content, please click like. If you know someone who would enjoy this story, feel free to share it via your social media, be it WhatsApp, YouTube, Instagram. That brings us to the end of this episode. I'm sending a lot of love and light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.